können jetzt live gehen. And we're live.
So, I guess it's 6 o'clock, and I think you're all waiting for the last keynote. And however, it's also the very last session of CSET 2020, and so we have some last words to say. And as you might have guessed, this session is about awards. We want to honor some people that showed excellence in reviewing, in research, and of course, in contributions to software engineering education, the Nancy Mead Award. Let's begin with the CSET 2020 Distinguished Reviewer Award. We had 68 members in the program committee, which all did a very great job. However, there were some that were outstanding. And they we wanted to honor them, and we selected them according to the criteria timeliness of reviews, which is, by the way, very, very important for program chairs. Otherwise, we cannot make a timely decision. Length of review it's an indicator. It's an indicator criteria, and then from these, how quality and useful the reviewer comments were. And from these, we have 3 very outstanding reviewers that were not one short or maybe not so helpful review was among them, and that did a very great job. And we appreciate this effort, and we are very thankful to have you on board. And we want to honor Mike Barker from Japan, who actually cannot be around at this time. We want to honor Christopher Bull. Christopher, are you out there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, thank you very much. We very much appreciated your effort on the program committee and the real work that you did for providing us with reviews. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And also, last but not least, Tayana Conte from Brazil, who also did an amazing job on the program committee and provided us with so helpful comments. Tayana, I guess you're also out there. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
So thereby, we hope that we will find the one or other of you in the networking session afterwards. But for this, I'll turn over to Elke.
Thanks. Congratulations also from my side. Thank you very much to everybody, also the other reviewers, but you did outstanding work. Thank you very much. I'm not aware if we had any distinguished reviewer rewards with XSEED so far. But each year we have the Best Paper Award. So also this year we will announce the best paper. And I just want to tell you a little bit about the selection process. The papers were nominated from the full research papers and the papers in a special track on ad hoc distance teaching. The nomination prerequisites were strong acceptance ratings, which means no single score was allowed to be less than 1. For those who are not familiar with our ratings, 1 is weak accept, 2 is accept, 3 is strong accept. So we have 3 acceptance levels. And the other prerequisite was the average review score of at least 2.0. And we had 4 papers who met these requirements. And out of these 4, we had to select the best paper. We formed a selection committee consisting mostly of XSEED steering committee members, and they voted independently of each other. And we came up with actually 2 papers ex aequo. Okay, so the winners are Bastian. Could you please come on? Next slide, please. Thanks. Paper Inner Dev Workshop, a one-day introduction to combining design thinking, lean startup, and agile software development by Franziska Dobrigkeit, Daniele De Pola, and Noel Carol. I hope I spelled everything correct, but I think Franziska is here, I think. Are you here? Maybe on the phone? As before, I don't know. Not here? No one here? Okay. So the next paper, also in first place, on complementing an undergraduate software engineering course with formal methods by Bernd Westphal. Bernd is here. Are you here?
I am here.
Oh yeah. Okay. So congratulations to all 4 of you. Okay.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
You deserved it, all of you. So we will move on to the next award, which will be presented by Bastian.
That's right. Congratulations, all recipients. You've done an amazing job, and you were the key pinnacle that made this program so successful, in my opinion. We have one more award to give away, and this is the Nancy Mead Award for excellence and contributions to software engineering education and training. We have the particular pleasure that Nancy is around. She's here and says hi. The winner this year is Pierre Bourque. Pierre certainly needs no introduction, but before I do it anyways, let me tell you a few things about this year's selection process. As you know, the Nancy Mead Award is an award that is regularly presented by the steering committee of this Conference for Software Engineering Education and Training. The award is given out after a thorough review process of nominations that we usually around the half-year mark before the beginning of the conference, we send out calls for nomination. Every single nomination is reviewed by the steering committee as well as the committee of previous award winners, and then nominations are counted by returning officers, which in this year were Tim Lethbridge and my humble self, and we calculated the votes for each of the particular nominations. And this year there was no competition. This year it was Pierre Bourque who was the winner. Pierre, like I said, certainly needs no introduction. Pierre has been involved with software engineering and software engineering education for longer than I have been out of high school. And Pierre has extensive industry experience. He has worked at the National Bank of Canada on software engineering and database design and data modeling. Pierre has served as the dean for the École de Technologie Supérieure at the University of Quebec, where he is also a professor of software engineering. He's currently on sabbatical at, if I'm seeing that correctly, CGI. And we have the absolute extraordinary pleasure of presenting this award to you. And by the sheer, magnificence of having this done last week already, you already have your award with you. Do you happen to have it sitting next to you by chance, Pierre?
Yes, I do.
Congratulations, Pierre. Thank you so much for all the contributions and this marvelous piece of excellence that is that is your work. And without further ado, I would say, please honor us with your keynote, sir. And we will have a couple of more words at the end of the keynote and some time for question and answers. But Pierre, if you want to, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Bastian. So let me share my slide. And you should be seeing my slides. Configure my multiple screens here so I can see everything and see everybody.
Well, this was the right screen.
And I assume you see my slides right now. So the title of my talk is called the SWEBOK Guide. Of course, I'm mostly known for having worked on the SWEBOK Guide for numerous years. And so the title of my talk is the SWEBOK Guide more than 20 years down the road. The first meeting that I attended on the SWEBOK Guide, my colleague Robert Dupuis and myself, we flew to Washington and to meet Leonard Tripp, late Leonard Tripp, and Jim Moore, and the offices of the Computer Society that they had at the time, in a beautiful older house in Washington, D.C. And this was in late 1997. So now we're in late 2020. This is certainly more than 20 years down the road. And I will reflect upon the SWEBOK Guide and its impact. And there is a SWEBOK Guide a V4 version or V4 project on. I am not involved whatsoever in this project. So maybe at the end, I'll give some insights perhaps on how they should proceed. I know they are proceeding, but I do not know at all. I'm not involved whatsoever. So maybe this talk will help in this regard. So let me begin. Let me make sure I can get my screen here correctly set up. So it is certainly for me an honor to receive this award, and thank you for your very kind words. And thank you, of course, to the award committee and to my 3 nominators. I certainly very much appreciate it. I remember when I first started hearing about software engineering many, many years ago in an undergraduate course and my an undergraduate degree, and we used the, I remember in that course, we used one of the very early editions of Roger Pressman's book many, many years ago. And I was already passionate about software engineering in those days, and I believe I still am. The SWEBOK guide is by definition a team effort. It is a collective effort document. I'd like to thank, and mostly what I will be talking about, and mostly what was in, I believe that my nomination was about the SWEBOK guide, so I will certainly talk about it. So thank you to all the SWEBOK guide contributors. There were numerous contributors and sponsors. I will give some indication on the number of contributors later down the road. And of course, a very special thanks to the SWEBOK guide editors and co-editors, Alain Abran, Robert Dupuis, Dick Fairley, Juan Garbajosa, Gargi Kini, Jim Moore, and Beijun Shen. Thank you to my, just give me 1 second here so I can get this off my screen. Thank you, of course, to my employers, to the 2 universities that have employed me and the many years that I worked on the SWEBOK guide, L'Université du Québec à Montréal, and l'École de Technologie Supérieure, which is also located in Montreal, and they are both part of the University of Quebec system of institutions. Thank you to the Computer Society, of course, for supporting this initiative financially and many other ways for numerous years. And special thoughts to the late Leonard Tripp, who maybe some of you have met, but he has passed away now a number of years ago, whose great vision initiated this project in the, I would say, late 1990s. So I will give a brief overview of the SWEBOK guide and its development process in this talk. And then I'll spend quite a bit of time on some reflections on the impact of the SWEBOK guide through selected usage examples. And so that will spend quite a bit of time, and these selected usage examples will be framed or classified, if you wish, in terms of the initial objectives and the initial audiences that we expected at the outset of the project. So I will sort of reflect on, did the SWEBOK guide had the impact through these selected usage examples than we thought it did. Bastien wasn't quite right in my profile. He didn't quite get it right. That's okay. So I was a faculty member at, and I still am, but I was a faculty member at l'École de Technologie Supérieure. And in 2000, from 2013 to 2019, I was not active, or very, very little active in software engineering. I was dean of students, which is a kind of vice dean or associate dean. I was involved in, program assessment and accreditation and academic policy and academic regulations and all things of this nature, not for the entire school. We're one of the largest engineering schools in Canada, and I was not involved in software engineering at all, except for teaching 1 graduate course a year. And from 2019 to 2020, for 12 months, and I finished right when the pandemic was beginning. So after 2 terms of being dean of students, I decided to go back to being a faculty member, and I was eligible for a sabbatical, and completed my sabbatical in industry, really working in industry. At CGI, at a division of the Canadian IT multinational CGI here in Montreal. I was working for a former graduate of our Masters in Software Engineering program. And I will therefore, and then I've been returned to being a faculty member for a couple of months now. And I will, so after talking about the, giving some reflections on the impact of the SWEBOK guide through selected usage examples, I will also give some observations about the current content of the SWEBOK guide after having recently completed this sabbatical year in industry. And then I will give some remarks on the challenges of moving forward. So this is the plan for my presentation. I was told that to ask questions after. Perhaps you can, of course, we'll have an open discussion after, but if somebody wishes to ask a question, make sure they don't forget it. Perhaps you can put them in the chat and somebody can monitor, maybe Bastien, you can monitor the chat and you know, point to me any of these questions that I have, that I'm, make sure I answer all these questions at the end. But of course, I will be very pleased and to discuss and answer any of your questions or controversies or things that you don't agree with or whatever happens to be after I give this presentation. I look forward to that, in fact. So let's begin by a brief overview of the SWEBOK guide and its development process. So let's go back to the mid-1990s. And in the mid-1990s, this part here, licensing was a really big thing. It was a controversy. People were, you know, there was all kinds of discussions in Canada and in the United States and elsewhere in the world about licensing of software engineering. And was this good? Was this bad? And lawyers were even getting involved in this, in the discussions, notably in a Canadian lawsuit and so forth. And the Computer Society said, wait a minute, we can't focus on licensing. We have to focus on the profession as a whole. And this figure comes from, is adapted from a book by Steve McConnell, published in the late 1990s, and it looks at the components of a profession. And not all professions have all of these components. Some of them have various subsets of these components, but I would say the most traditional recognized professions, law and accounting and medicine and so forth, very, very well established and regulated professions, have all of these components. So you have professional societies that where professionals meet and interact and have conventions and policies and, you know, and peer reviews and so forth. This and conferences such as this one, you know, this is what professional societies do. Accreditation policies, accreditation guidelines, accreditation criteria, and generally, what do we accredit? Well, we accredit undergraduate, sometimes graduate programs as well. In France, my French colleague is online. I see one of the accreditation agencies is known as the CTE. In Canada, it's known as CEAB. In the United States, we have ABET, and there are many others in the world. Generally, a profession has some kind of initial professional education. For example, in software engineering, it would be, to simplify things, I do not want to get into the debate in this slide. What's the difference between computer science and IT and software engineering and so forth? But I would say an undergraduate degree and then software engineering, let's say. Skills development, or what we have in you know, work terms, co-op work terms, perhaps internships and things of this nature. And we could also so we could also so skills development is things of this nature. So you know, we've been talking lots of presentations and on soft skills and so forth. Then there's certification. There are numerous certifications available in the computing field in general. So in this slide, the certification is given by companies, by private agencies, I would say given by non-governmental authorities. And there are, you know, numerous certifications that are available. And licensing, what licensing means here is that it comes sort of given usually by some kind of governmental authority or some organization that has some kind of governmental power, and it is something that is more formal and potentially enables you to do certain tasks in a legal way, from a legal point of view. Professional development. Professional development is things that you do throughout your career. It could be training. It could be all kinds of lifelong learning, and these are the terms that we use for professional development these days. And a code of ethics, which would prescribe and recommend, or from a deontological point of view, what you should be able to do and what are your responsibilities and what is not recommended and what you're not allowed to do. So in the mid-1990s, the focus was on licensing, but you can't really get the licensing unless you have many of these other components. And underlying many of these components, not all of them, underlying many of these components is a consensus on a body of knowledge. You can't have an agreed upon accreditation criteria or initial professional education curricula, where you can't have consensus on a model curricula, for example, if you don't have consensus on a body of knowledge, or it certainly facilitates things. Professional development is the same thing for lifelong learning, consensus on a body of knowledge, or different forms of body of knowledge. It could be different levels of body of knowledge, I would say is somewhat of a prerequisite, or certainly a strong enabler to get consensus on professional development strategies and frameworks and international guidelines and so forth. Licensing and certification is the same thing. Licensing and certification is based on various criteria, based on various exams, based on various requirements and so forth. And consensus on a body of knowledge is also certainly a strong enabler, if not a prerequisite, to develop these licensing guidelines, policies, frameworks, or certification guidelines and policies and frameworks and so forth. So the Computer Society said, okay, let's work on the body of knowledge, and we will, wherever the profession goes, let's work on the body of knowledge, which is somewhat less political than many of these other components if you take them individually. And it will help it will help the profession move forward. So let's work on so that's what happened. The SWEBOK guide objectives were identified as following. Number one, characterized sort of a little bit in that spirit. The SWEBOK guide objectives were identified as the following, and there was 3 published versions of the SWEBOK guide, and they all have these same objectives. Characterize the contents of the software engineering body of knowledge. What are its characteristics? How does it, how do you qualify, how do you characterize whatever its properties and so forth of the software engineering body of knowledge? That is the body of knowledge that is proper to the software engineering discipline. Provide a topical access, or an index, if you wish, to this body of knowledge. Promote a consistent view of software engineering worldwide. Software engineering is very, very much an international field of endeavor, very much so. The Computer Society, the IEEE, certainly sees itself as a worldwide organization. Most of its memberships, at least a few years ago when I was on the board of governors, was from outside of the United States, and therefore, many of the software engineering is also performed, of course, by numerous organizations and companies and so forth, which are multinational. And many of the sponsors of software of the SWEBOK guide at the time were worried that software engineering would be going in different directions in different parts of the world. Clarify the position and set the boundary of software engineering. Where does software engineering situate itself, and what are the boundaries, even though you can't cut it with a knife, of software engineering with respect to other disciplines, such as computer science, project management, computer engineering, and mathematics. And provide a foundation for curriculum development and individual certification and licensing material. These were the 5 objectives at the outset of the SWEBOK guide, and they remain unchanged up until the V3 version. The intended audiences that we set forth in the SWEBOK guide where public and private organizations wishing to use and promote a consistent view of software engineering internally, notably when defining education and training, job classification, and performance evaluation policies. So we could see that there would be a usage of the SWEBOK guide for essentially HR reasons. Practicing software engineers wishing to enhance their professional skills, makers of public policy engaged in defining software engineering licensing rules and guidelines for professionals, professional societies engaged in defining software engineering university program accreditation criteria, guidelines, and certification rules and guidelines for professionals, software engineering students learning the discipline. Certainly this one is relevant to this conference, and probably everybody in this listening to this talk is in this category. Educators and trainers engaged in defining curricula and course content, and researchers looking for an agreed upon framework when discussing their work. These were the intended audiences set out at the beginning, and to the best of my recollection, they remain the intended audiences across all three versions. This definition is the most important definition in the SWEBOK guide. The SWEBOK guide is aimed at the target of the SWEBOK guide, if you wish, is generally accepted knowledge. What does generally accepted knowledge mean? Well, we had one definition, and I would say one guideline. The definition is it is applicable to most projects most of the time, not applied. That's very important. Not applied. It says applicable to most projects most of the time, and for which there is widespread consensus about their value and usefulness. This is definitions come straight out of the project management body of knowledge of the PMI. We also had a secondary, I would say, complementary guideline. It is the knowledge that a graduate of a North American bachelor's degree in software engineering should have after having completed 4 years of experience. So not straight out of school, but after having 4 years of experience. It excludes by definition, advanced and research knowledge, that is knowledge that is at the, I would say, the forefront of the field, used in advanced companies and so forth, and knowledge which is still only in research labs and universities and so forth. And it excludes specialized knowledge, which be knowledge that are applicable to automotive software. I believe there was a workshop earlier this week on automotive software. So this type of knowledge is by definition excluded of the SWEBOK guide. Some underlying principles: transparency. The development process is itself published and fully documented. It was. The development process is designed to build over time consensus in industry among professional societies and standard setting bodies, as well as in academia. And that happened as well. And available free on the web, and at least one format on swebok.org, and it still is. In fact, I would say perhaps the main reason why the SWEBOK guide is not an IEEE standard is that the person who initiated it, Leonard Tripp, knew very well that if it became an IEEE standard, if it was under as an IEEE standard, it would not be available free on the web. It would be sold, and standards are sold at relatively higher cost, much too high a cost for it to be available to undergraduate students, for example. So it was decided at the outset of the project that it would be available for free, and we had a number of corporate sponsors in the first two versions, especially the first version of the SWEBOK guide, and also the IEEE Computer Society provided quite a bit of funds. The trial version of the SWEBOK guide, this could be clearer here, it was published in 2001. As you can see, there was a number of corporate sponsors, SAP and Constructs and Rationale at the time and so forth. And it was also translated into Japanese. Published in 2001. It was called the trial version, and that was exactly the spirit. We put it out there. There had been extensive reviews. What we put it out there to get feedback based on usage. The next version was published in 2004. It was called the 2004 version, and it was also translated into Japanese. I was an editor of the first two versions. I was an editor across all three versions. SWEBOK V3, which was the main editors, if you wish, were myself and Dick Fairley, was published in very, very early 2014. It was completed. We completed it, I should say, not I, but we completed it in the first months after I'd been named the Dean of Students. And we completed it in the fall of 2013. It was made available right after the outset of the new year in 2014. It is also available in Japanese. It is also available as an ISO IEC Technical Report. The 2004 version and the version V3 are available as an ISO IEC Technical Report 19759. They are available for free as well. These technical reports are available for free, contrary to most other ISO documents. It is a technical report and not a standard, because in the ISO way of doing things, a standard is prescriptive and the SWEBOK guide is a descriptive document. It describes software engineering knowledge. Therefore, a document which is descriptive is known as a technical report, but it follows exactly the same review and adoption processes as a standard. The fact that it is a technical report recognized by ISO is an important thing. I would say, and very valuable in certain parts of the world, and in other parts of the world, it is, the fact that it comes out of the computer society is more valuable. So that's variable from one part of the world to another, and we work very closely with representatives from ISO IEC Software and Systems Engineering Standards Committee throughout the project to make this happen. They are the SWEBOK guide. Both versions of the SWEBOK guide were adopted as is. Leonard Tripp, who I mentioned, initiated this project. I once asked him, can we consider this a peer-reviewed document? And he was a guy from industry. And he told me this will be the most peer-reviewed thing you've ever done in your career. So I've indicated some statistics here. Number of reviewers, the trial version, 500, 125 for the 2004 version, 150 for V3. Number of countries, from 30 to 40 countries. Number of comments, basically 12,000 individual comments across all versions. For each one of those 12, they're not available anymore, but for each one of those 12,000 comments, you could go on the web at the time and you could say, so-and-so said this comment given by this reviewer, and it was identified for each and every individual comment. We identified how it was resolved or how it was adjudicated in the public manner. So, Bastien, you made comments 7,433. We could go and see it was accepted, and your comment was on, paragraph 6 of this knowledge area. You could go and see if your comment was accepted, partially accepted. If it was partially accepted, why, and what part was partially accepted, and if it was refused, you could go and see why. In addition, there was a formal ballot among the IEEE, the entire IEEE Computer Society membership on the V3 version. There was an actual ballot. There was, in all cases, formal resolutions by the Computer Society Board of Governors, very, very formal resolutions of the Computer Society Board of Governors. And in the past, for the 2004 and V3, there was a formal ISO IEC review and adoption, commenting and adoption procedures were followed. So this was a very, very, I would say, a lot of time and effort was spent on doing this. And if I go back to this slide, consensus building, the development process is designed to build over time consensus and industry among professional societies and standard settings bodies, as well as in academia. This is perhaps the best way to illustrate this. To be honest, unfortunately, in the late 1990s, at the outset of the project, the ACM was involved in this project, and they pulled out of the project in the late 1990s, and it was for concern and controversy about licensing, and they pulled out. They did not pull out for actual reasons containing, I would say, the actual content of the body of knowledge itself, but they were very concerned that we were promoting licensing per se. So the ACM was involved at the beginning, but not later. Computer Society was the major professional society after that. The SWEBOK guide deliverables were defined in the following manner: consensus on a list of knowledge areas. This consensus is held for a very long time. Consensus on a list of topics and relevant reference materials for each knowledge area, and consensus on a list of related disciplines. These were the three major deliverables. And you have the list of knowledge areas from V3 here. So I would say the first 5, there's a little mistake here. It's software test. Should be say software maintenance. There's a typo there. The first 5, without I would say promoting it, and we're not promoting in any way, shape, or fashion a sequential way or waterfall way, but the first traditional way of decomposing life cycle phases. And the ones on the right-hand side, I would say, are, you could say in many ways, orthogonal or cross-cutting, or they certainly, I would say, interact with the ones on the left-hand side. So software requirements, software design, software construction, software testing, software maintenance, software configuration management, software engineering management, software engineering process, software engineering methods and models, and software quality. In the V3 version, we added 5 knowledge areas, which were either underlying or, I would say, very relevant to software engineering curriculum. So this is software engineering professional practice, software engineering economics, computing foundations, mathematical foundations, and engineering foundations. The recognized related disciplines are the following: computer engineering, computer science, mathematics, project management, quality management, and systems engineering. And for each of those knowledge areas, we have a breakdown of topics, such as this one for software requirements. For each of these topics, each one of these topics, we have a description, a couple paragraphs, usually, maybe half a page at most, and we point to relevant reference materials. So if you go back here, consensus on a list of topics, and then relevant reference materials for each of those topics. So it's called Guide to the Software Engineering Body of Knowledge, because the body of knowledge itself is in the reference material. We're not in the, we're just a guide to the body of knowledge. The reference material was not very well commented on in previous review, and in the 2001 version, and there was few documented examples of the usage of the reference list in the 2004 version. So therefore, we were very, very careful about the reference list, and we controlled very much the reference list, especially the size of the recommended references in the V3 version. And in the end, you will find 36 reference items, books and reports that are all identified in Appendix C. And we were very, very careful in controlling this list and making sure that it wasn't getting too large. I would say the previous versions of the reference list were simply too large to be usable. So let's talk a little bit about the impact of the SWEBOK guide through some selected usage examples. And for each one of these examples, I will have a little table like this. So, you know, if we go back to components of the profession, this example is related to licensing and professional societies. If we go back to the SWEBOK guide objectives, this one is related to characterizing the contents of the software engineering body of knowledge and clarifying the position and setting the boundary of software engineering with related to other disciplines. So and if we look in terms of intended audiences, this one is related to makers of public policy. So I'll go through a certain number of examples and then try to reflect, I would say, on the impact of the SWEBOK guide. Did we meet our objectives? Did we actually reach our intended audiences? And did we somehow advance the various components of the profession? So the SWEBOK guide is cited, and this is the first example, a number of times in the internal technical report that led to the recognition of software engineering as an engineering discipline or specialty in my province by l'Ordre des ingénieurs du Québec. And this report also led to the decision that graduates of accredited software engineering undergraduate programs, perhaps I could have put, be eligible for membership in this professional engineering association or body. So one example, and very, very much related to professional engineering. More recent, this was in 2001. More recently, a paper by Engineers Canada that provides information and guidance on the nature of engineering practice. So they were trying to relate about engineering practice in software engineering versus common. What is, I'm quoting here, and I'm not here to open this debate, at least not in this slide, on the nature of engineering practice in software engineering versus common software development, and is intended to help officials to identify software engineering practice that should be regulated. The SWEBOK guide, and therefore, in this case, was used in the context, I would say, of certainly a document related to licensing of software engineering. So it seemed to have influenced or helped, I would say, these licensing officials reflect upon how software development is different from software engineering and how. So that's how I would say, that's why I put number one, characterize the software engineering discipline, and number four, I would say, distinguishing between different disciplines, and this is makers of public policy. This is one example. I probably will not go through all of them. This is another example taken from a paper published in IEEE software a number of years ago, that it certainly shows very well the example. And it was a paper called an ontology for micro-architectural design knowledge. And they really situated in this figure, which I copied here, reproduced here, where their ontology would fit in the SWEBOK guide breakdown or taxonomy of topics. So they said, okay, we're proposing this ontology for, and it would fit right here. This is where we would situate it within the software engineering body of knowledge. So here we're just used as providing a topical access to software engineering, a topical access to software engineering, and this is, I would say, for researchers. Not too many, I did not find too many examples related to accreditation, but this is one, and it's not a very strong example. It's from the accreditation manual of the Australian Computer Society, and the SWEBOK guide is cited as an example of where you could find knowledge described for software engineering. So, and then one of the criteria is that says there should be ICT discipline-specific knowledge areas are those identified in international curricula, standards, and other sources relevant to the program's domain. And they give as an example SWEBOK guide. So, you know, I related this to accreditation. This is professional societies, and we're certainly for providing a topical access for educators and trainers, and you know, I related to those three SWEBOK guide objectives. terms of certification, there's an ISO standard called ISO 24773, which establishes it was renewed and I think updated in 2019. It established a comparison framework of national and international certification schemes of software engineering professionals. If you have a scheme in Japan and another one in Australia as an example, how do they compare? How are they different? And among a few other bodies of knowledge, because it relates to systems engineering as well, the SWEBOK guide is used as a baseline or a reference body of knowledge for. So you map to the SWEBOK guide. Both certification schemes would map their body of knowledge to the SWEBOK guide, and therefore we could have discussions on how they are similar and how they are different. So in this case, I related it to certification. I related it to promoting a consistent view of software engineering knowledge worldwide, and providing number 5, which is providing a foundation for curriculum development and individual certification and licensing material. And I related it to professional societies, but perhaps you could also put it to makers of public policy. And certainly in terms of undergraduate curricula, the SWEBOK guide is cited and the model 2004 curricula, and it's in the 2004 model or reference curricula for software engineering. It says the SWEBOK guide is put forward by the ACM and the Computer Society. It says the SWEBOK guide is identified as being one of the primary sources in developing the body of knowledge underlying these guidelines. So it was really, really used as an underlying body of knowledge to be able to define especially the core component of this model curriculum. In 2014, the 2014 version, it also makes it is also referred to as an important document. So in this case, I put it for initial professional education, promoting a consistent view of software engineering worldwide, and being a foundation for curriculum development. And we've put it here, intended audience as educators and trainers. At the graduate level, it is an important document in the model curricula known as GSWE 2009, which provides a model curricula for professional master's degrees in software engineering. The SWEBOK guide knowledge elements is identified as the primary source in developing the core body of knowledge for this model of curricula. And in the Master of Software Assurance reference curriculum published by the SEI, it is mentioned that the SWEBOK guide is one of the recognized bodies of knowledge on which reference curriculum is built upon. So exactly in the spirit that the SWEBOK guide was designed for. This is another example. We have radial plots here. This was in a paper published in 2009, comparing a whole series of curricula of master's degree in software engineering. And they used the SWEBOK guide list of knowledge areas to compare them. And here are the axes of these radar plots are they correspond to the SWEBOK guide knowledge areas, and the position on the axis depends on their coverage, their level of coverage of the SWEBOK guide knowledge area. The SWEBOK guide is an accepted body of knowledge, used as an accepted body of knowledge of software engineering when defining professional skill and competency frameworks. I have 3 here. The first one was put forward by this. So this is for skill and competency frameworks for HR reasons, or for career development reasons, or for eventually for defining performance evaluation policies, or hiring policies, or role profiles. These are the types of things that you do with these skill and competency frameworks. And I have 3 cited here: SWECOM, which was done by the Computer Society and published in 2014. And I would say perhaps 2 that are better known and that are not only for software engineering, they are used there for the entire computing or IT field. One is coming out of the UK, the other one is out of Europe. European standards. So the first one is known as the Skills Framework for the Information Age. And SWECOM and the SWEBOK guide were used in developing the software engineering component of or competencies in this framework, known as Sophia 7. It is the 7th version. They are currently working on the 8th version. And the other one is coming out of Europe and is a European standard, standard 16234, and is called the European E-Competence Framework. The SWEBOK guide was used, another example, was used to structure an internal 10-day training program quite a few years ago, in a paper published in 2012 at Siemens Corporate Development Center in India. And the SWEBOK guide was used heavily to develop, it was a very influential document according to this paper, to publish, to define and develop a training program for industry practitioners. It was delivered in the classroom at the time. I do not know if it still exists, and probably would be delivered online if it is now. And I've identified the relevant networks. It's very hard to find an example of the SWEBOK guide related to code of ethics, but I did find one, and really there's not that much usage for the SWEBOK guide in terms of code of ethics. But this paper published in 2018 did an analysis of the software engineering code of ethics and professional practice, and did a mapping of the code of ethics and professional practice to the list of topics in the software engineering management knowledge area, and seeing how relevant each different clauses of the code of ethics and professional practice were to the various topics in the software engineering management knowledge area. And based on this analysis, this paper proposes some additions to the descriptions in the code. The SWEBOK guide was used. This is an example, I would say, for researchers and also educators and trainers. The SWEBOK guide, a couple of papers published more recently. In one case, I believe, is 2020. In the other case, it was published both in 2020, so I would say recent. The SWEBOK guide is used as the SWEBOK guide breakdown of knowledge areas and sub areas was used to build a survey of practitioners in order to identify knowledge gaps of recent graduates of software engineering and undergraduate programs entering the workforce. So they developed a survey using the SWEBOK guide and identified a whole series of practitioners. And based on these, the results of this survey, the intent is to make graduates more relevant to industry when they come out. The SWEBOK guide is a list of knowledge areas, was used to classify published papers, once again, in another paper published in 2020. So here I put it, they relate to initial professional education, number 5, which provide a foundation for curriculum development, notably. And we're talking about educators and trainers and researchers, because this is research on software engineering education. The SWEBOK guide was used in some recent papers here, 2020, 2018, 2020, and 2018. The SWEBOK guide is used as a framework to classify papers and systematic mapping studies and literature review, either at the knowledge area level or at the topic level within a knowledge area. So they're using this, they're identifying all kinds of papers in a given topic in a systematic mapping study or some kind of a literature review, and then they're classifying these papers using the SWEBOK guide so very much related for researchers here, and very much related to using the SWEBOK guide as a topical access to a field or a subfield. In fact, the SWEBOK guide, in this case, we're using the SWEBOK guide to classify papers in systematic mapping studies and literature reviews. But here in another paper published in 2019, the SWEBOK guide was used as a framework to classify systematic mapping studies. So we're at the tertiary level, perhaps, and either at the knowledge area level and at the sub area level. So this is so here you can see we're in software requirements, software requirements fundamentals, or software requirements process, which are now we're at the topic level or sub-area level, here at the sub-area level. And these would be the papers, which are themselves systematic mapping studies of other papers. So it was used as a classifying framework. So here's some coverage I've made of the selected example usages that I've shown in the, I've covered most of them. And of course, this is not a coincidence. I tried to make sure that I had examples in the various components of the profession, based the initials and SWEBOK guide objectives all the way from across all three versions, and the intended audiences across all three versions. I do not have any examples in this presentation for professional software engineering practitioners, or for practitioners of software engineering, or for software engineering students themselves. Again, I don't have any examples in this presentation. So I've been reflecting quite a bit on the impact of the SWEBOK guide, and did we meet our initial, did we influence the components of a profession? So the ones that I put thumbs up, this is a very subjective, personal, non-scientific qualification, evaluation, significant impact. I believe, yes, we've had significant impact. Up to you. From my point of view, not that significant, but you may disagree with me. So, or I'm being very politically correct, one or the other. So certainly I would say in initial professional education, we've influenced model curricula So that's, 2 versions of model curricula. And also I know that if you look in the literature, we've influenced various curriculas directly across the world. This is a mistake here. This little thumbs up should be in professional development. I just realized that, I'm sorry. So skills development, I would say it's up to you. This is a mistake. Once again, I'm sorry. I'll fix it after the presentation. Did we influence co-op programs, soft skill development programs, and so forth? I'm not too sure about that. Certification and licensing. From my experience, certification and licensing at the software engineering level. There's lots of certifications on. Lots of certifications are available on different tools, and perhaps you can at Agile Alliance and also many other initiatives. But at the software engineering levels, I don't see any major impact on certification in terms of actual usage, and licensing, from my experience, is not become such a prevalent issue so far, at least in the circles that I'm aware of, perhaps than was initially thought of or initially worried about in the 1990s. Accreditation. Did we have, generally accreditation guidelines try to shy away, at least in Canada and others that I've seen, they try to shy away very much from getting involved in the nitty gritty details of the specifics of a discipline. They try to stay at a very high level. And so therefore we did not have that much influence, but and in general, they get very little into the nitty gritty details of software engineering. The guidelines are at a more high level, generic level across all engineering fields. These two should be, I just realized I made this mistake. The thumbs up should be over here. Professional development, which if we include graduate studies, especially professional graduate studies, graduate masters, we influenced strongly the model curricula. It was published in 2009, so I would put a thumbs up. Code of ethics, in reality, we don't have too much to do about the code of ethics, so I did not put any influence. And professional societies, do we have an actual lasting impact on the professional society themselves? I'm not sure about that. So, but certainly, initial professional education and professional development, I believe we have had significant impact. Of course, that's all up to you. Characterizing the contents of the software. Let's look at the initial, characterizing the objectives, characterizing the contents of the software engineering body of knowledge. That is sort of identifying what are the properties of software engineering body of knowledge as opposed to other bodies of knowledge. This is actually getting, in my opinion, harder to do than it was over 20 years ago. The field is getting, the computing field is getting much larger, and I'm not sure that we actually contributed to that much. Providing a topical access to the software engineering body of knowledge, yes, I believe this, we did have had significant impact, and I gave quite a few examples in my previous slide. Promoting a consistent view of software engineering worldwide, I believe we did, perhaps through the model curricula. Perhaps through the model curricula, but have we had significant impact? I'm not sure about that. Clarifying the place and setting the boundary of software engineering with respect to other disciplines. This is getting harder, in my opinion, not easier. And I'm not sure that that we actually really enable this that much if we look over the many years down the road. Providing a foundation for curriculum development. Yes, I believe we did. Had significant impact in this field. And regarding individual and certification and licensing materials, certification and licensing at the software engineering field, and I would say, agnostic, from an agnostic point of view, not related to a specific tool, method, approach, life cycle. This is as the SWEBOK guide is intended to be. There hasn't been that much usage of such certification and licensing as far as I can see. Public and private organizations wishing to use and promote a consistent view of software engineering, especially when defining education and training, job and performance evaluation policies. I believe, yes, we've had significant impact because we have had impact at least on two of the very widely used skills framework, or widely known skills framework. There is also one in Japan, which I'm not familiar with, and that the documents are not as easily accessible to me as the ones that I showed you. So one coming out of the UK, and they're used in I would say the Anglophone world, and the other one coming out of Europe, and it was recently updated. Makers of public policy, once again, involving software engineering licensing rules and guidelines, professionals, so-so. You may disagree. Professional societies, so-so again. Software engineering students learning the discipline, especially I would say from a self-learning point of view. I'm not sure that we've had that much impact. Educators and trainers engaged in defining curricula and course content, yes. And researchers looking for an agreed upon framework when discussing their work, I would say yes. We've had impact. You can debate whether it's significant or not, but I believe we've had impact. So let's talk a little bit about the current content of the SWEBOK guide, having recently completed a year in industry. So I recently spent 1 year in an 80-person software development, maintenance, and support group in Montreal, really doing field work, if you wish, industry work. So so it's some things that I expected: extensive usage of agile approaches. I worked in industry at the National Bank of Canada, but this was many years ago. So of course there was extensive usage of agile approaches. Of course there was an increased focus on security. Of course there was an increasing criticality of software, and the software was getting more critical, and therefore that involved changes in how they do things as well. But two major observations that I did not expect. I believe Gerhard, I see him, you will agree with the first one. The first one was the obsolescence of software project management. There was no software project management at all. That caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting that. Gerhard told me I heard his talk the other day. I heard him speak, probably would say I was not up to date, and I would agree. But in this organization, there was no software project management at all. And the process maturity and discipline was being achieved out of technical necessity rather than by external or internal methodological pressure. So, you know, there was no CMMI evaluation or contract, some kind of contract with the supplier, with the customer requiring that they be at CMMI level 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever happens to be. And I'll explain this in the next slide. So no project management. This organization was, and I'm not promoting SAFE in any way, shape, or form, but this organization was implementing SAFE. And so the reference is here, but you know, in this, so there were a large organization that was they were implementing the scaled agile framework. It is one of the commonly adopted large-scale agile frameworks, and there are others as well. I'm not promoting this one, but you know, that really caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting that. There is no traditional software project management. There is no Gantt, no project deadlines, no schedules. Everything is on a continuous basis. Operations, development, of course, it's in an agile format. Everything is budgeted annually. And the teams, you go from program increment to sprint to program increment to program increment. And that caught me off guard. So, you know, it's everything is done in an operational manner, I would say, including development, not only operations. And process maturity and discipline being achieved out of technical necessity. So they were, of course, in DevOps. So automated testing, continuous integration, continuous deployment, and release on demand. They require, you have no choice. I rigorously followed processes at a fine granular level. And these processes must be implemented in various tool sets and frameworks, and they must be followed. Otherwise, you're not able to do this. And this process maturity and discipline, as I said, was not achieved by some kind of process assessment or methods group that was pushing the newest approach or whatever it happens to be, or the newest agile approach. But they have to be achieved and they have to be implemented and followed in these various tool sets. Otherwise, you're not able to do this. So interestingly, the very, very opening of the SWEBOK guide, the very, very opening. Now you must remember that this guide was published in 2014 and took a couple of years to actually get consensus and go all through the process. So we're talking about the early 2010s here rather than the latter 2010s. And I believe the second or third paragraph of the SWEBOK guide, we define what is software engineering. And it is the definition of the computer society. And the computer society says the application, the software engineering is the application of a systematic and disciplined, quantifiable approach to the development, operation, and maintenance of software. That is the application of engineering to software. And if you look in the SWEBOK guide, V3, you will find very little, if not nothing, about operation. It's all about development and maintenance. So
Pierre, would you yield for a question?
Yes, of course.
So Tim asks, was the maturity achieved out of technical necessity or because of technical means, such as automatic testing, continuous integration, etc.?
Both. I mean, I would say both. So, you know, sort of the same thing. And I mean, to be able to do this, to be able to do continuous deployment and delivery and automated testing and so forth, you are required to have such tool set and use them at a fine-grained level, and thus those tool set must be able to support this functionality as well. It's sort of I would say both in your. So one of my major conclusions from my year in industry in this group, which was working in a large-scale agile mode, was that software engineering was shifting towards operations management, an operations management mode of doing things rather than project management. And I just asked a question here. Is this what DevOps is all about? You know, is the ops winning over the devs, the dev part on the entire Is DevOps really ops? Because it was run in an operations management point of view, and in many cases, development could be seen as another forms of operations, not only operating the system once it was in production. I'm a little bit over time here, so I will continue and some remarks on the challenges on moving the SWEBOK guide forward. You enable me to go on for a few minutes, Bastien? Can't hear you, Bastien.
I said, right, I couldn't hear you either. Could you repeat the question, please?
You allow me to go on for a few minutes?
Yes, go ahead. We still have a little time.
Okay. So in terms of moving on, some thoughts on the challenges of moving the SWEBOK guide forward. Of course, you must review and incorporate newly generally accepted knowledge and remove knowledge that is not generally accepted anymore. And I give some examples here. And, software security the content must be increased and certainly thought about, and agility and automated testing. And those are things that perhaps were not as generally accepted a couple of years ago. Of course, the SWEBOK guide must be done in a more iterative, agile fashion, but those things are all obvious. Perhaps less obvious things, I'd like to come back. I believe that you have to revisit the fundamentals and moving forward the SWEBOK guide. We have to go back to the SWEBOK guide objectives, remember? So if we go back to the SWEBOK guide objectives, and I will go back here, these were the SWEBOK guide objectives. Do we still have to talk about providing a foundation for individual certification and licensing, clarifying the place of setting the boundary with other disciplines? Is this still relevant? Is this still what we want to do, and so forth? So we must, whoever is working on this now or wishes to work on it in the future, really revisit these objectives and think about them very carefully. And I'm not promoting a solution here. I'm just encouraging to rethink about them. The same with the intended audiences. Is this still the intended audiences that we wish to have 20 years down the road, especially considering, I would say, the influence, the intended audiences, and those were the intended audiences, and did we influence, did we impact each one, and are they still relevant, and should we continue? The intended impact or influence areas, I came back and I talked about, I went through these slides. Is this still relevant? Do we still wish to impact all of these areas, considering on the ones in which we had impact and the ones we did not have impact? Are these still the components of a profession? Software engineering has evolved. Software engineering is much more multinational. They really have to think about this very carefully. Really think about this definition and moving forward, right? I made some notes here. The distinctions are getting harder to make and require revisiting. The difference between specialized knowledge and generally accepted knowledge is perhaps not that easy to do. This complementary North American bachelor's degree plus 4 years of experience was, of course, very North American centric, but it was included notably for alignment with the requirements for licensure. Is this still relevant? This definition, should we still be using it? And another example, with more, can and should we somehow consider the empirical evidence in this definition? This is something perhaps that we should consider, not just consensus opinion based, but are we far enough in the empirical evidence down the road to be able to somehow request empirical evidence in support of these various, before including these various topics. The consensus and a list of relevant reference material. I worked across all 3 versions. The list of relevant reference material involves much work, much debate. It certainly, without any doubt, provides depth and rigor to the document, but I have not seen much documented usage across all 3 versions, including the latest versions. And it certainly is a lot of work, and it's hard to keep up to date. It certainly is as I said, provides depth and rigor, and then we say we are the guide to the software engineering body of knowledge. The body of knowledge is in the reference relevant, and the relevant or pointed to reference material. But if you look for actual documented usage, I don't see that much. The list consensus and a list of related disciplines is perhaps more necessary than ever, but it's also much harder to achieve. The computing field is expanding, and the distinctions between the disciplines are getting blurrier, and I'll have some slides on this. So for example, an example that are related disciplines that the differences are getting blurrier. The increased presence of software-enabled systems is making it not that easy to distinguish, or probably harder, I would say, to distinguish systems engineering from software engineering. And this list of related disciplines probably is not up to date, and it's getting harder to do. Just as an example, I've reproduced this figure of different bodies of knowledge in the computing field. And this figure comes from the European Framework for ICT Professionals. I mean, SWEBOK is in there, but there's all kinds of others. And distinguishing all these disciplines is probably more relevant than necessary, than previously, more relevant than before, but it's also getting harder to do. And most of us are educators on this conference, and we've all tried to explain to university administrators and parents and students what's the difference between computer science and computer engineering and software engineering and IT engineering and informatics, and this is getting harder to do. I took this out of CC 2005, but basically this is a figure from CC 2005, and the earlier views of computing curricula. In the pre-1990s, there was electrical engineering and software and computer engineering. Computer science was separate. There was 3. Then at the end of the 1990s, it was getting, there was overlapping. Computer engineering was overlapping, and we went from 3 to 5 or 6 different curricula. And in 2000, so this was in the post-1990s. In 2005, and I've used these figures myself many times to try. In my school, we have computer engineering, we have information technology, and we have software engineering. And I've used these figures more than once to explain to various university administrators, parents, and for example, our co-op or work term coordinators. What's the difference between computer engineers who are not software engineering, but it's getting harder to explain. We have 2 axes here, and they have to do sophisticated figures. And I'll just show you the figure from 2020, and it's getting much harder to explain. So of course I won't present this in detail, and I'm not saying this is a bad figure in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying that the discipline is getting larger, and these distinctions are getting blurrier. So perhaps it's more important than ever to do, but it's also getting very harder to do. So in my concluding remarks, it is an honor for me to receive this award and certainly to give this keynote address. My involvement in the SWEBOK Guide is the cornerstone of my career in software engineering, and very pleased to receive this. And I believe that the SWEBOK Guide has contributed, and you can debate to what level, to the maturation of the software engineering discipline and profession. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you very much indeed for this very, very detailed and historic account. Much appreciated. Before I open for questions, I would like to give the word to Nancy Mead. Nancy?
Oh. Thank you. I think Pierre has been overly modest. In the late 1990s, for those of you who were acting in your profession at that point in time, we had a huge amount of difficulty trying to convince deans, department chairs, industry, that software engineering really was a discipline, because they would say to us, well, you want us to offer these degree programs, what is the body of knowledge that they are based on? And so we would say, oh, well, we have all this industry experience. We have this experience with students. We've offered master's degrees, didn't go anywhere. Engineers would say, well, why do you think it's engineering? Another big discussion. People in software development would say, oh, I'm a creative person. Software development is an art. We don't need to worry about what the discipline might be or the body of knowledge. We know how to approach these problems. So I would say that the impact of SWEBOK has been huge, and it has enabled us to do a lot of things that would never have been possible before. I would also add that Pierre's accomplishment is not solely in development and involvement with SWEBOK, but I think that the career that he has had across academe and industry has allowed him to have a perspective that is tremendously important in not only developing something like SWEBOK, but also in contributing to the profession as we know it today. So I would say, Pierre, great job, and we hope you continue.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. Do we have questions from the audience?
Either everybody's asleep or I was so clear that they have no question.
Hi, this is Tim Lethbridge here. Congratulations.
Thank you, Tim. I knew you would have a question.
Well, I actually had a question in the middle, and I wasn't expecting it to be answered in the middle to interrupt you like that.
That's fine.
But I was very interested in your experience in working in a company during your sabbatical. Yes. And I was pleased to hear that they're employing, modern, what I would call modern software engineering techniques, including agility and DevOps. One of the things that I have observed, and it could be a false observation, but I don't take this negatively, but I think that a lot of the people who contribute to SWEBOK might not have had the kind of experiences that you have had, where you've actually, a lot of the professors contribute to SWEBOK, industrial people in big, especially, aerospace companies and things like that. But the kind of companies that you worked with, we need them to contribute to the next version of SWEBOK as well, so that this trend towards no budget, operations driven, balancing and making development and operations one, and automating lots of processes, that needs to be part of it, because it's the way of the world. And I think that some things in the existing SWEBOK probably ought to drop by. I mean, the whole notion of maintenance and is an evolution is kind of being subsumed just into ongoing development and operation.
Yes, but you have to certainly in the context where I was working, which was in a software as a service software on the web and the cloud. Critical, I would say, from a business point of view, but it was used by external customers, and certainly, if it went down, it would be certainly very public. I will not say what the software was. In this context, yes, it was certainly very much an iterative fashion. There's the distinction between maintenance and software. I would say the software maintenance tasks were incorporated in the various software development groups, and there was in fact, I worked on preventative maintenance tasks, and they were being incorporated into the various backlogs of the various software development teams. So yes, the concept of distinguishing maintenance and development, I would say, was getting very blurry. There was a support group, and they were doing mostly support rather than what we would call software maintenance. They were doing mostly third level support more than actually doing maintenance. However, this was a software as a service on the web or in the cloud group. I'm not sure that this would be the case in other industry sectors. If we were working in the defense sector in a systems engineering environment, working on embedded systems or something different, I'm not sure that it would be as this way of working would be as appropriate in such an environment. I'm not saying that there's not parts of this way of working that would also could also be used in such an embedded environment, but I'm not sure that what they were working at in CGI and the group I was working in, which was a large, software as a service piece of software. It worked very well. And other types, I don't think it works necessarily across all industry sectors. You have to be careful about that. And when we teach to our students, we don't just teach for that industry sector in particular.
But I think my point is simply that we need to make sure that we strike the appropriate balance in SWEBOK going forward. And my observation, having talked to a large number of students coming back from co-op work terms and internships, is that there's been a seismic shift in the last decade, a wave, even in embedded software. I have talked to students who work in embedded software where they've moved into this DevOps, because now you can update the software on the device anytime you want, so that you can have continuous integration, you can have simulations, load the new version onto software, into the firmware even, and voila. So it does work even in those kinds of environments. And almost every sector is moving in that direction.
No, I agree. I'll tell you the little stories that when I went back to being a faculty member, I will be teaching. It was my intent to teach a course on software quality. We have a course combined software quality and project management. It combines those two items. And as you know, probably Tim, project management is a criteria in our Canadian engineering guidelines or criteria. We have to teach project management. Okay, so this team was led by a graduate of our master's in software engineering program, and I said, okay, I'm interested in software requirements because that's what I teach, and project management and software quality. Well, he says, I can give you work on software quality, and I can give you work on, and this was like 2 months before I began. I can give you work on software quality, and I can give you work on software requirements. We need help on that. Sure, come and help us. But we don't do project management anymore. I said, what? And that I wasn't expecting that. To be very, I was a dean for 6 years, right? I wasn't necessarily as active as in software engineering. I was doing other things. And then we said, what do you mean, Ricardo? There's no project management. No, we don't do that anymore. It doesn't exist in our framework. That caught me off guard.
Well, if I may, I would say only because it doesn't exist in someone's framework doesn't mean they don't do it, right? I mean, you could argue in a way that they have been doing software project management since the 70s, and when they started thinking about software economics.
In the traditional sense of project management, having Gantt charts, setting up project teams, doing budgeting, having a project leader. What you find in the PMBOK, no, they don't do it.
My argument is they do different things to manage.
I'm sorry, they do manage. They manage. There's no doubt. There's management. They manage very much these various activities. To be very honest, many of the other things, they have buzzwords, which are different buzzwords than we used in the past, right? That's very, and you could go on and debate that. Some of these things are the same as before, using different buzzwords, but in the traditional sense, where of setting up a project team with a deadline and a deliverable, and the team is dissolved at the end of and the team is a temporary, and the project is a temporary endeavor, and we distinguish development, which is done in a project mode, from maintenance, which is done more in an operations mode. This is how I worked when I worked in the National Bank many years ago. those distinctions, this is not done in the same manner anymore in the organization in which I worked in. As I said, I'm not able to generalize this across all industry sectors. Tim is probably right.
Yeah.
It is being used more and more across different industry sectors. But in the organization that I was in, as I said, I was not expecting that, and that caught me off guard. And I've been teaching some of that upon my return.
So program management might be the word today, but if you say they don't do project management anymore, you have to be careful that that isn't taken as a pejorative. They may be doing better management. They just are not using it. They're not calling it projects anymore.
No, they certainly, yeah. So it's, as I said, in this organization, I would say the shift is from a project management role, from development to an operations management, not in the sense of what the software how it is being operated, but in the sense that it is a continuous, ongoing activity which we repeat, every day, every sprint, every program increment, and it sort of goes on forever, as opposed to a temporary endeavor, which we set up a team and then we dissolve the team at the end of the temporary endeavor, and has its own budgets and its own deliverables and its own schedules and the team, and then it's separate from maintenance. It was not. But this was a software as a service environment.
Thank you. Other questions, comments,
did
thoughts?
Did I answer your question, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just kind of wanting you to confirm what I was thinking, but and indeed you did. So yes.
Yes, and you're right. The SWEBOK guide does not talk about any of this. That's absolutely correct. And in French, because so the technical word for my year was une année de ressourcement, which means it's not exactly like a sabbatical. It means after I was a management position, it means to refresh yourself, renew your knowledge. That's how you would call this year, and that's what I did. I renewed my industry knowledge. Any other questions?
Bernd has a question.
I will have one question. So you
Yes,
mentioned you had 12,000 comments in total over the versions.
Yes.
And now we could consider each comment kind of a review outcome. Somebody did look at that block or text or sentence or whatever.
Absolutely.
Do you have a feeling for, say, the coverage? So did different parts of the SWEBOK get different amounts of comments?
Yes. I don't have the statistics, to be honest. So I'll give you, I don't have the statistics. I would say by recollection only, software requirements, the ones that professors like, the ones that are software requirements, software design, software construction, got a lot of feedback. Probably software engineering management got a lot of feedback. The ones that perhaps the one that has become absolutely essential in modern days, but perhaps was not as glamorous in the SWEBOK days, did not get that much comment, was software configuration management. And now this, of course, in the DevOps world is become absolutely, really, really super important. Always has been, but I'd say increasingly important. And yes, it would not evenly across all areas. Some of in fact, recruiting the knowledge area editors was so. For example, at the time, recruiting an editor for software configuration management was difficult at various points. Recruiting a software construction also was very difficult. Because software construction generally, not only most of these were written by academic people, but not too many people think about construction in an agnostic fashion. They think about construction, and we have experts on Java and experts on this type of programming. We had talks on programming paradigm, or this talks of technology or so forth. But the software construction knowledge area is written in you have to write it at the level of genericity, if I can say that. That is across all technologies, and that was hard to do. And in fact, the first version that was written was too abstract. So the feedback that we got from actual practitioners, this may be technically correct, but it's sort of too abstract. We don't understand what it means. So somebody had to we rewrote it in a more down to earth fashion, I would say, but without getting into actual technologies, it's quite difficult. So.
I can think so. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments, suggestions, thoughts, hopes, desires?
Gerhard, did I say something that's shocked you, surprised you?
No, not at all. I really appreciate your work to get to such a complete picture of software engineering and all that. And I'm not really sure how that will even be possible in the future without a major effort. So I'm really a little bit shocked in a certain way how the future of that will be, because the fields are merging, software is everywhere, so many disciplines working with it. I'm not even sure if it's really possible anymore to be able to sustain that.
The field is growing, for example, let's say artificial intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence and software engineering is artificial. At what point?
Data science and so on.
At what point is it artificial intelligence specialized knowledge, and how much of testing of artificial intelligence should it be within the generally accepted? Or I would say, in my opinion, it's getting perhaps more difficult. Yes, the field is growing, and the number of specialties is increasing.
Well, that may in part also have to do with the fact that some of those specialties are transitioning currently, in my opinion, from a research field to a field of application, right? I mean,
yes, of course.
Natural language processing, AI, big data, things like that. They've been researching this in one shape or another for the last 30 or so years, but now it's becoming such that we can widely apply it. Now's the time to make money with it, right? So
also the systems engineering and software engineering are software is playing a much larger role at the systems level now, and also we have to think about that carefully.
And also how people interact, the whole team dynamics, etc., because so many people have to work together in good ways, and this way of working together also has to be reflected in the technological way of doing things, and vice versa. So you can't even distinguish that anymore. So you have to include that as well.
I would say that perhaps that's the junction of management, general management, and software engineering. Those are probably management. And the field is getting, of course, everybody knows that the field is getting larger, and computing is being more and more used in various contexts, and increasing level of criticality as well.
We have all
Thank you,
a huge
Bastian.
responsibility.
You're welcome. I thank you, in fact, as I have to thank you. Again, Pierre Bourque, winner of the Nancy Mead Award for 2020. Well done. Thank you very much. That means we are pretty much at the end of our time together. I'd like to hand over to my friend and colleague Stefan for some closing words.
Thank you, Bastian, and thank you, Pierre, for the nice keynote. We prepared a few slides. It won't take too long, so please bear with us. Can you see my screen? Yes,
we can, Stefan.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Then, it's time to say goodbye. The conference is at the end, and we want to take the chance and the opportunity to say some final words from the program chairs, Elke, Marian, and the general chairs, Bastian, Bernd, and me. What remains from this virtual conference? Hopefully a lot of impressions in your minds and a lot of connections to new people, a lot of new ideas for your research and for your education so that you can improve your education further. We also have a couple of artifacts that stay active and a couple of statistics. So here you can see the statistics from Virtual Office. So we had around 37 participants per session on average. And you see some of them have been a little bit more interesting. Some others were not that interesting. But to be honest, the statistics are not with unique users. So if people join multiple times, then the numbers also go up. But I guess it's a nice indication that some of the workshops especially were quite interesting for the people. Also, the Academy of Software Engineering was very interesting. And people also did apparently a lot of networking. I think this could have even been a little bit more. But I guess the program was also very packed and we didn't have too many breaks for networking. So this is definitely something that we could improve in the future. We also have a couple of YouTube statistics with the videos that have been most viewed. For example, the software curriculum was very interesting. The keynote session was very interesting. The sessions from today are not listed yet because YouTube, I guess, needs another night to process these results. So I guess tomorrow it will also be more interesting to see how the sessions from today have been watched and the videos from today. We also amazingly had more than 1,000 views on YouTube, more than 150 hours of material has been watched. And the good news is all this content stays active. So you can also watch it afterwards and you can review all the videos from the presentations. You can even look into the discussions. I think we had a lot of fruitful discussions during the conference, and all this content stays available. And in case you want to watch something, feel free to go to the YouTube channel and check out the videos. Also, the Slack channel will stay active. So we have more than 100 people in Slack now, and you can still continue to talk about certain topics, basically in the channels, but you can also have direct messages with the people that have been participating in the conference. And we will also try to reuse the Slack workspace for future conferences so that the community has a chance to connect more often using these tools and to also connect in between the conferences, not only when there is a conference, but you can also easily reach out to other people on Slack in case you have additional questions or you want to look up something or you want to just ask the paper author about some additional aspects that you have found relevant or where a new question has appeared. We'll also have a conference webpage staying available with the material and the links and the teasers and the videos. So take this as an overview where you can find all the material, where you can have a link to the papers, the slides, the teaser and the video, so that you can also quickly navigate through the content. The proceedings are available on IEEE, as we have sent out the link already. Notice that this link will not be free for everyone in a few days. So in case you have not downloaded all the papers yet and your institution does not have IEEE access, feel free to download the papers now. This link is also posted on Slack, and I guess we can also send out a follow-up email so that everyone has the link. Make sure to download this in case your IEEE access will not stay open for the days after the conference. We also want to get your feedback, and we will also send out this link to everyone, but just as a little teaser, what was your experience, especially with respect to the virtual conference? What did you find interesting? What kind of elements for the flipped conference model that we have applied were interesting? How did you find was the networking? Is it comparable to a real conference, or would you rather prefer a real conference in case this is possible? These are important questions. We also have a steering committee for this conference series, and we are currently discussing about the formats in the next years, and therefore we need your feedback. And it's very important that you tell us what you like and what you dislike, what we can improve, what we should keep doing in order to further improve this conference series in the next years. Then I would quickly hand over to Hakan. I already saw you in Zoom because Hakan represents the organizers of the next CSEED series, which will be joined with the SEED track at ICSI. Hakan, can you say a few words, please?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Hakan Ardagmas, and my co-chair cannot be here today, Ana Moreno. So CSEED is joining forces with ICSI SEED for just 2021. And ICSI 2021 will unfortunately be virtual. So too bad we won't be in Madrid, but our hearts will be. But nevertheless, I believe it's going to be a great conference, and building on the experience of other virtual conferences, we'll find ways to enhance the participant experience in that format. I can assure you of that. So let me talk about JSEED a little bit. So it is kind of a temporary merging of two communities. The program community is composed of both JSEED community and CSEED community. Sorry, SEED community, the traditional ICSI SEED community, and JSEED community. And for that, we expanded the type of submissions for 2021. Actually, the submission deadline has passed for the JSEED track, but we received research papers, experience reports, idea papers, and tool papers, which were not or haven't been traditionally part of ICSI SEED. We received more than 90 submissions so far, but don't lose hope, because if you haven't submitted anything so far, we will also have a full day separate event, the workshop on software engineering education for the next generation, that is separate from the main JSEED track, and submissions are open for that. The deadline is January 12th. So there is plenty of time to submit position papers. And one of the people who are organizing it, Stefan, is actually here. He is going to be the one running that workshop with my colleague, Cécile Pierre. And it will not be a mini conference. It will be a real interactive workshop. And I think it's going to be very interesting. So I really encourage you to submit, even if you have submitted a paper to the main track, to also submit to the Seeing workshop as well, to tap into JSEED in another way. So I think that's all I want to say. We're looking forward to seeing you virtually at JSEED in May. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Hakan. And I can also just recommend everyone to submit a paper to the workshop. We will be we will be given a very good feedback, and I think the workshop will also be very interactive. So try it out, and we will have a good time in the virtual conference. In 2022, CSEED will join forces again with HICS in Hawaii. So hopefully the conference can then be a real conference again, and people can enjoy the nice atmosphere in Hawaii again. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned for 2022. And in fact, we will now have 2 more conferences in the next 14 months. So the CSEED 2022 will be already in January. So I think we have a packed 14 months in front of us with 2 more conferences for CSEED. In case you are interested in this conference series, in helping to organize one of these events, or in helping to organize the program in the next years, please talk to us, send us a mail, or get in touch with us. We are searching for new people who are interested, who are motivated, who are having new ideas of how to organize such events. So in case you're interested, please get in touch with us, and then we can talk about your participation in the organization or in the as a program chair in the next years. And that's basically it from our side. We hope you have enjoyed CSEED 2020. We hope you further enjoy the videos that are still active and the communication on Slack. Give us feedback on the survey, and enjoy the next conference in 2021. I guess we can stay around here and chat a little bit if you want in this room. Otherwise, the official conference is over now.
Thank you everyone for joining us. This conference wouldn't have been possible without you.
Let's unmute everyone and clap.
And a big thanks to Stefan and Bastian. I think they did a really great job, and I'm really the working with them was so cool in the preparation, and they're always open to feedback, and it was just fantastic. I would like to have people like them more at TNG, even more.
Yes, I completely
Well,
agree.
thank you for the kind words.
Thank you.
It was a
Yes.
team effort. We had lots of people helping us, including Patricia, Moritz, Nadine, Kevin, Eric, lots of people.
Elke and Marian.
Yeah, of course.
Exactly. I think Dan Port's not here, but on behalf of the steering committee, we'd like to thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Well, now always that's left to do is, get on writing those papers for the next time and stay healthy in the meantime. Hey.
Absolutely.